right?
Operational control. All my orders at that point would be controlled by the Central Intelligence Agency. They would work through. Actually, the position that they used to work to gain movements, as I would receive orders and see who signed the orders, was a person who would be seated as the Deputy Director of Intelligence to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And most of the orders that I have, you'll see, I have, they may be in there, one of them may be in there. You'll see that this person is the person who would sign those orders through the years and actually move me from one place to another. At one point, that man's name was Colin Powell.
So what was Colin Powell's rank at that time?
I think he was a two-star general at that time. That position was a two-star position.
So in essence, you actually went to work for the CIA, even though you were in the military.
Even though I was
status.
In the military, and pretty illegal. You know, you can't. We couldn't draw checks from two entities, double dip, but our operational efforts were all controlled by the CIA.
And what were your assignments after that? You came back, you recovered, you gained your health back. When you were being taken care of physically and regaining your health, was Pop with you, your friend from Oklahoma?
No, he had been sent straight back to the States. His head wounds, he received head wounds also. They were so severe that he had to go straight back to the trauma and care center.
So that was the end of your relationship or association with Pop?
Until later years, yeah.
Until later years, okay. Right. You've been in touch with him since then, okay. But right now you're going to work, you're still in the Air Force, you're going to work for the CIA. What were your assignments?
One of the assignments, to give you an example, I was moved all over the place. I was sent down working, because it was such an intense mission and there was a lot of knowledge on my part. The orders were they wanted to hold me close to the White House, so I was actually...
Weren't they afraid you were going to talk?
Well, that's what they wanted to ensure, you know. If they just gave me open movement, it's one thing, but they kept me under very tight reins. I worked at Key Biscayne at Homestead Air Force Base in the White House down there. I was in charge of the receiver site for Air Force One when they would come in. In addition,
was Nixon the president then?
Nixon was the president then.
Weren't you a little nervous over that?
As a matter of fact, myself and my NCOIC were going out to the control tower to bring in Air Force One at one point, and he had made a mention to the Secret Service as they were checking badges of personnel going in, saying, he said, what are you doing in the area? And the Master Sergeant said, oh, we're here to see the crook. We found ourselves face down by the Secret Service, and then when they got our credentials, they said, what are you guys doing talking like that? So
little did they know, huh?
Well, he was just joking, you know?
Yeah. Little did they know that
Nixon
had given the order that you were not to return from an assignment in
Campbell. I never told him that, you know.
Right.
I had never told my NCOIC. I kept my lips closed and zipped for all 25 years, and in 1996, that was the end of the 25-year classification period, and I started my book then.
But before we go up to 1996, Chip, you had some assignments involving drugs and drug running by the CIA, right?
Well, and yeah,
you're not reluctant to talk about that, are you?
No, in two different arenas. In in the Vietnamese conflict, there was some involvement simply because the Air America pilots, you know, sometimes would carry drugs, sometimes they'd carry wheat, sometimes they'd carry rice, sometimes they'd carry weapons, you know. It was various cargoes that they'd carry, and my job when an aircraft went down, primarily because they were carrying crypto gear, communications gear that was secret and had codes on it that couldn't be gotten by the enemy. I would have to jump in, I'd retrieve this crypto gear, and many times retrieve the precious cargoes that was on board, heroin sometimes, and see that it was extracted.
Air America being a CIA air operation.
CIA air operation, yeah.
So you had that in Vietnam, and then you came back and you went to work, you were involved in...
Actually, when Nixon went to Peking, I was involved in that.
Okay, tell us about that.
I was sent ahead of him into a place called Guam. I controlled the aircraft across, and then I was moved over closer. And
what year are we now?
That was, I think, 72. Okay. Maybe 72.
So you went to Guam. You were to control the air traffic.
controlled Air Force One across, and then we were also one of the primary communication stations. I was moved to a place that we use today even as a primary commo spot, and I can't give that place away, but it's very close to China, to the Chinese border. Then we were moved there to maintain contact in case there was an emergency, so we could put fighters in.
And but that was it. I mean, basically, you were just guiding the plane. I mean, keeping the lanes open so no other aircraft would be in that air lane, right?
We'd keep aircraft 25 miles from Air Force One. We'd have 2 fighter aircraft in front of Air Force One, 2 fighters to the rear, and have rescue aircraft up in different locations along the way.
And, okay, nothing unusual about him going to Peking, though, was there?
No, nothing at all.
Okay.
Other than he's the first president, you know,
to go to China.
Right, and now going along with him with open access was Dr. Kissinger, so.
Right. Okay, let's go back to your CIA activity in South America, Central America.
In 1978, I actually left service of the government. Bill Colby had, being my handler, had moved on in the early 70s to Washington to take a position, and ultimately became the director of the CIA. He maintained, because of the sensitivity of what I knew from that mission, he maintained direct control over me. And when he passed the baton on to the new director of the CIA, that new director called me back out of the field. I was in Yugoslavia at the time. Colby debriefed me, and Mr. Bush rebriefed me. And he was explained during the briefing and debriefing that I was loyal, I was a good man, and anything he needed, I was a trusted entity, and he could count on me. I had no problems with that.
Bush was head of the CIA at that time, and he personally debriefed you?
He personally in-briefed me as his personal...
In-briefed me, yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
As one of his personal assets.
Right.
So that was my first contact with the man who would someday become president. Bill had become a good friend, Colby, through the years, and worked with me, trained me, taught me the ropes, and he told me, he said, Chip, you know, you do have some enemies in Washington. You know that Haig and Kissinger are very powerful men. Nixon's a very powerful man. You need to be sure that maybe you need to leave government service. You don't have me up here to protect you any longer. So I did. In '78 I left. I relocated to Colorado, started my family, got married, relocated to Colorado, started a little sandwich shop, and I was in the sandwich shop one day, and in walked these 2 guys with sunglasses and...
Suits again.
God, those suits.
Okay, you're jumping ahead now. I want to go back out to Central South America. Are you avoiding that, or?
No, we haven't gotten to that.
Oh, you haven't?
That
oh, really?
Was in 1980 when I was reactivated.
Oh, in 1980 you were reactivated. Okay,
right.
So you go to Colorado, and all of a sudden 2 guys with suits walk in with sunglasses, and what do they say to you?
They say, Bulldog, and I just thought, oh, no. And I didn't answer. Then they said, Pegasus, and that was the code name that I was given. So I knew, you know, I didn't know who they were at first, but when they used Pegasus, I knew I was toast.
Right. Pegasus was a code word used for your operation?
Right.
You personally?
That was my code name.
Okay.
So I was told that my new assignment was to go to a place called Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
But you were out of the service then?
As a reserve officer, you're never really...
No, you're in the reserve?
In the reserves, right.
Okay.
I was reactivated. I was sent to a place called Fort Campbell, Kentucky. They decided after the problem in the desert, trying to get the hostages held in Iran, where our aircraft all went into one another, that they needed a task force set up for anti-terrorism. So they decided they'd put together an aviation task force at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. They took CIA assets, CIA officers, they put them under the control of the National Security Council, and they built this new unit called 160th Aviation Company that really wasn't on any of the military TO&E equipment lists. So there we were.
Another covert operation.
Another covert operation building itself in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. During the time from 1980 through 1984 that we were building that unit, testing different techniques of flight, testing different flight platforms. A lot of them I can't talk about. We would get into some heavy losses because we were doing things that never were done with these helicopters and other aircraft that we were flying. And so on one particular occasion, we lost one of our unit commanders, a major, flew into some high power lines during a nighttime exercise. He was killed. His co-pilot, a warrant officer, had his legs cut off. During the post-crash investigation, a man from Washington came in and he identified himself as Jake. He was accompanied by another man who wouldn't identify himself, and so we just nicknamed him the Snake.
Jake the Snake.
Jake and the Snake. That's who was there. He was a pretty slimy guy, you know. We would later find that Jake was a person who was attached to the NSC, and his actual name was Oliver North.
And that's your first contact with Ollie North?
That was my first contact with Ollie North.
And so what happened after that?
We had, saying we, the United States government had pushed for a little rebellion down in Central America, a place called Nicaragua. They had pushed and helped organize a group of rebels called the Contras. They talked them into fighting against the Sandinistas. I don't know why. I have some ideas why, but I won't get into just my ideas because I don't know why, other than someone thinking that it's a terrible thing that a country have its own sovereignty and not do like we are. Have this
and not be ruled by the CIA.
Right. At any rate, the CIA promised that they would fund and they would back this rebellion, but a man named Boland came out with an act in Congress that after we had set this thing up and it started, the war was in full swing down there, didn't allow us to support them any longer, except in a humanitarian effort. So the next thing I knew, I guess because of my contact with the then Vice President of the United States, who actually oversaw, by National Security Decision Directive Number 2, actually oversaw all intelligence operations.
George Bush.
George Bush, having been personally handled by him, and him knowing that I was reactivated and working in this Special Operations Unit in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, they said that we want you to go down posing as a humanitarian down there. And in the briefing with North, I said, what do you mean as a humanitarian? He said, you're going to be a medevac pilot now. You're going to fly medical aircraft into these Contra camps. That's humanitarian. It's allowed. And you'll serve, in the briefing he said, you'll serve 3 entities. You'll serve the United States Army as a medevac pilot. You'll serve the United States Embassy through the military office. And you will serve, and that was CIA, that portion. And you serve the Pegasus operations, that we'll call it, because of your code name. And Pegasus operations are directly controlled by the NSC.
Now, was this North give you this briefing in Colorado when you walked into your shop, or was this later?
No, this was much later. This briefing was actually done in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Then the next thing I knew,
North gave you the briefing there?
Right. I had.
So North walks into your shop in Colorado, says, "Hey, come on."
No, two agents walked into
Oh, it
the
wasn't
shop in
North.
Colorado.
I thought
No.
Jake was North.
No.
No, okay.
Well, Jake was, but Jake and the Snake came to the crash investigation where my commander had gotten killed.
I see. Okay.
At
Okay.
Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Right. So the people that walked into Colorado, that was not
They
North.
were just a couple agents coming in to let me know I'm going back to work.
Okay. All right. And then you were briefed by Ollie.
I found that they were actually NSA.
Okay.
So
You want to explain what NSA is?
National Security Agency. They do a lot of the background checks and everything in the United States. A lot of the spooks who listen to everything that's said here is NSA.
Right. The communications mainly is their job. Like wiretaps and keeping track of all of us via the telephones, and that's their job. So you're in Fort Campbell, you're given this assignment, you're going to be flying in and out medical supplies, right? And where are you flying these medical supplies out of?
Out of the Contra camps. When I finally went down posing as a medevac pilot, we went into the Contra camps. We'd always take coolers in. Usually the coolers going in were C4, explosives, grenades, things like that. And we would bring medical supplies out, and those medical supplies we would bring out in these coolers, big 124 quart coolers, was actually packages, bricks of cocaine.
Okay. Did you actually see this?
Actually saw it, actually tested it.
And where did you do this?
We did field tests right in our medevac offices in Pomerola Air Base.
So before you'd put it on the plane, you'd test it, make sure